Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first ever Johnny the Wire podcast presented by Horse Guy Mike. I'm your host, Johnny the Wire. Now, I know what you're thinking. Normally, my friend Horse Guy Mike is doing the intros. So where's he at today? Well, Horse Guy Mike couldn't be here because he's on baby duty. So probably dealing with a lot of pooping, a lot of crying, diapers, all the good stuff, all the fun of being a new dad for the second time. And so he will not be joining us tonight. Therefore, I have to step up to the plate. I have to carry this team. And so I've got a great Pick-6 for you. It's a $50 ticket. We're going to go over the Preakness card on Saturday. It's another big day, the second leg of the Triple Crown. And as a little treat, I get to host for the first time. So, I'm thinking, well, we're going to be doing the Preakness card. Oh, let's do it from Pimlico. So here we are at the infield at Pimlico, and we're going to be breaking down the Preakness Pick-6. I can't wait to do it. And I think if I hit this Pick-6, I think we're going to have a permanent host change in the future. Don't tell like that. All right. So with that being said, let's dive into the card. Now, the first race is going to be race 8, the Dinner Party Stakes. This is going off at 2:50 p.m. Eastern. So a nice mid-afternoon. This is race 8 on the card. So 7 races to get your beak wet, hopefully get your bankroll up. And then we hit the real stakes action around 2:50 p.m. Off to a great start already. All right, so the Dinner Party Stakes. Before we get into the horses, I just want to give a quick story time with Johnny the Wire. So the Dinner Party Stakes, you might be thinking, that's kind of a weird name for a horse race, the Dinner Party. So there's actually a great story behind it. So back in 1868 in Saratoga, New York, after, what I assume was an epic day at the track, a bunch of high rollers were having dinner out on the town. And one of the people at this dinner was the governor of Maryland at the time. Don't know his name, doesn't really matter. So anyway, the dinner kind of gets to a point where the governor proclaims that he's going to build the best horse track in America. And so he follows through on it. He builds Pimlico Racecourse in Baltimore, where we're at right now. And they built it, and the first season was 1870. So in 1870, they ran the first ever Dinner Party Stakes based on that dinner party 2 years prior. And so that was their marquee event for the first year. Now, here's the fun part. The first ever Dinner Party Stakes was won by a 3-year-old horse named Preakness. So Preakness wins the Dinner Party Stakes. The very next year, 1871, Pimlico creates a 3-year-old stakes race called the Preakness Stakes, and the rest is history. So for today's action, the first race is the Dinner Party Stakes. The last race is the Preakness Stakes, and we've got to try to hit all 6 in between. So with that being said, with the history out the way, let's jump into the field. Now, the Dinner Party Stakes is it's a grade 2 mile and a 16th race on the turf. So this is one of the better fields of the whole card, actually, a grade 2. And the favorite in here is Set Piece, 8-5 odds, Brad Cox trained horse. Now, I'm going to, in classic Johnny the Wire fashion, I'm fading the favorite right off the bat. I think this is another great time to fade the favorite. I tried to do it last week with Jack Christopher coming off a long layoff. That did not work. Jack Christopher looked amazing in the Kentucky Derby undercard. But today, on the grass, Set Piece, he's a 6-year-old horse. He's got 9 wins at 19 career starts. So you see that, you're like, oh man, he wins about 50% of the time. But if you dig a little deeper, 5 out of those 6 wins have been, 5 out of the 9 wins have been on synthetic, and he's had 6 races on synthetic, 5 out of 6 wins on synthetic. When he runs on turf, he's only won 4 out of 13 times. So I think the money, the real money's on either turf or dirt. Synthetic horses don't really have much of a chance to win big stakes races. So Set Piece did win a grade 2 last year at Churchill Downs, but that he was in really good form last year, and he's coming off a 7th place in the Maker's Mark Mile at Keeneland. Now, he was only 2 lengths off the lead, but still 7th out of 8 horses that day in a grade 1, and he's dropping down to a grade 2. I don't really see how his tactics kind of fit in this race. He's kind of he's kind of a not a true front runner, but he's not a true closer either. He's just kind of a mid-pack horse. So, maybe he's feeling good and he gets it done at 8-5. I think those are really short odds for a horse that, I think other horses in here can jump up and run, easily at his level or even better. And so with that being said, I have 3 horses that I'm going to try to play against the favorite. And we're going to start with the 1 horse on the rail, Tango, Tango, Tango for Jack Sisterson. Our boy, Tyler Gaffleone, he rides. We love Gaff on turf. I think he's one of the best jockeys in America. And he doesn't get as much credit as like the top guys like Flavien Prat, Irad, or Joel Rosario. But to me, Gaffleone is on their guys' level. And he's picking up the mount here on Tango, Tango, Tango. This horse is a 4-year-old now in 2022. And his first 2 races of 2022, both wins. He's 2 for 2. And they're both optional claimers. So now he's stepping up into graded stakes company. But he has graded stakes experience. Last year at Arlington Park, he actually ran in the grade 1 for 3-year-olds, the Bruce D, and he got 2nd place in a grade 1 last year. So he has some back class. He's upped his buyer up to a 92, which is getting very close to the top level of this field. Set Piece ran a 100 buyer, getting 7th place last race for reference. So Tango, 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 coming off a 92, coming off 2 wins. He's 4. Set Piece is 6. I think Tango, Tango, Tango might have some improvement in him in his 4-year-old year, especially on the rail too. He's going to save a lot of ground. Gaffleone's a great rider, knows how to put the horse in a great position to win. I think you need to include Tango, Tango, Tango. The next 2 horses I like are Beacon Hill, would be the 4, and he's coming off a 96 buyer. He's a 5-year-old, so he's had 1 race in 2022, got 2nd by a nose. Joel Rosario rode him then. He rides him now today. But again, 96 buyer, same distance, mile and a 16th. He's actually won a race at Pimlico last summer in July. He ran an allowance race at the same distance and won it. Now, granted, that was an allowance. This is a grade 2. So again, another step up in class, but I guess the way I'm looking at this, I don't think Set Piece is a really like rock hard favorite. And I think one of these other horses can rise up out of that allowance, type of level and go run a 100 buyer to get at Set Piece's level and, hopefully beat him and get a good price home in the first race. So I like Beacon Hill. He's a late runner. If you look at his form, he's ran the distance 3 times. He's finished on the board every single time. He's ran 6 races on the turf. He's got 5 out of 6 in the top 3 on the turf. So I think he's just a really quality runner, a late runner. And I think he'll be bringing a run late. And then the last horse I'm going to use is going to be the 6. That's a Tone for Mike Maker and Irad Ortiz. Again, I'm using the big jockeys here. A Tone also ran in that same race Set Piece did, the Maker's Mark Mile. He actually ran a little bit better. He got a 101 buyer. He finished 4th by a length. Set Piece finished 7th. So, now all of a sudden Set Piece is the favorite when a horse literally beat him on the square last time out. They're both coming out of that same race. So I like a Tone here. I will say Set Piece does win more than a Tone. A Tone only has 1 win at the distance on the turf. So, kind of a risk that maybe he just doesn't like to win. He likes to run, 4th, 3rd, 2nd. But I think the 101 buyer, it was a career high buyer for him. He's a 5-year-old. He's getting his 2nd start now off that 101. And I think he's ready. He could very easily take a step forward. So for me, I'm going to play against the favorite with the 1, the 4, and the 6, Tango, 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 Beacon Hill, and a Tone. So that brings us to the next race, race 9. It's the Chick Lang Stakes. This is a very fun race. This is a 3-year-old sprint race. So a lot of these horses either tried the Derby trail or the trainers kind of realized they were never going to get the long distance of the Derby. And so this is a 6-furlong sprint on the dirt. And then this is a grade 3. So it's kind of a kickoff race for a lot of these horses into the graded stakes sprinting of their career. And later in the summer at Saratoga, at Belmont, there's some really good 3-year-old sprint races that they can then point to if they win this one or have a really good run in here. So I actually look for 2 horses in here to have kind of, I wouldn't say head and shoulders above the field, but there are two that look really logical. And I'm actually going to single one of them because I think one of them might be even better than the other. And so really, we have three horses that ran like mid-90s buyers, 94, 95. And I'm only going to use one. This is where I'm going to take my stand in the Pick-6. You got to do it somewhere. And so I think there's one horse that the way he wins looks a little more legit to me than the other horses. And so we're going to get into this with the top pick. He is number 5, Old Homestead. He's actually the favorite in this race. I believe he's 2-1 when I check the odds. He's had 3 runs in his life, all 3 wins. So maiden win, allowance win, stakes win. Now, it was an ungraded stakes, but it was at Keeneland. It was 7 furlongs on a wet fast track. So he handled the off going that day. His first 2 wins were on fast dirt down at Delta Downs. So this is kind of the crazy thing. He's coming from Delta Downs, which is really like a minor league track in Louisiana. You know, it's kind of questionable usually when these type of horses show up in a big stakes race like this against other, you're going up against the big trainers they got a lot of money behind them, a lot of rich owners giving them expensive horses. And this horse is a $15,000 homebred, an overanalyzed sire. I don't know who overanalyze is, but he's a Florida bred. And he's been running big buyers. He started his career off with an 86. Then he went up to a 93, 94 in the stakes race. All 3 of them wins, all 3 of them by open lengths. His shortest win was by 3 3/4 lengths at Keeneland. And he beat a good horse that day named My Prankster, who My Prankster actually finished 3rd behind Jack Christopher on the Churchill Downs undercard, the Pate Mile. So there's some class in that race that he just won. And this horse is lightning fast out of the gate. He's never been in second place in any of his 3 races at any point. He just gets out in first place, and then he extends his lead all the way to the wire. I love that running style from him. It doesn't look like he gets tired. It looks like he has plenty left in the tank. He's actually cutting back in distance. So he went 7 furlongs last time. He's cutting back to 6 now. I think the 94 buyers right there at the top of this field, it's not better than the other horses, but it's right there. He fired 2 bullet workouts leading up to this race. So I think Old Homestead, I think he's a great opportunity to single early in this Pick-6 and hopefully, create some value that way by getting the single home. And the reason this is going to be a pretty important single is because the one horse in here is a horse named Coburn for Steve Asmussen. Steve Asmussen has won this race a bunch of times in the past. He won it last year with a horse named Mighty Mischief. He won it in the past with one of the best sprinters he's ever had named Matoli. So this is really a race that Steve Asmussen likes to get one of his better prospects and put it in to kind of get him started on that path to being a really good sprinter. And Coburn is definitely that horse for him this year. His last race was the Bachelor Stakes at Oaklawn. He got second by a neck. And I think he was, Asmussen, he was supposed to win that race, but another horse ran him down. He got a 95 buyer that day and got second. So he actually ran a better buyer than Old Homestead. Now, the thing about it is, I look at his running style, again, exactly like Old Homestead. He gets out to the lead and goes and goes and goes. He's had 4 races in his life. He's finished first twice and finished second once. His first race of his life at Saratoga last year, he got out to the lead and then he faded. He couldn't quite hang on that day. But that happens a lot of times with horses. The first time out of the gate, they don't, they go really fast and then they kind of get spooked or they don't really know what's going on. And then they fade out of it. He came back with a win, and then he had another win in an allowance race. And then the stakes race, I think he was supposed to win, but a horse named Wheeland Springs ran him down that day. So, I have a little bit of pause that he did get run down in his last race. And so I think he's very logical on the form, on the buyers, on the trainer, on all of that. I just think, man, he got ran down by this horse Wheeland Springs, who I'll talk about next. So maybe Old Homestead is just that much, he's just a little bit better and he doesn't get run down. So maybe Old Homestead, and especially with Old Homestead being outside of Coburn, I think he'll be able to put a lot of pace pressure on him early, and then maybe Coburn will kind of fade out of it. So I'm going to take a stand there against Coburn with Old Homestead. Now, that third horse I mentioned, Wheeling Springs, kind of crazy. He's an Arkansas bred that ran down the big Steve Asmussen favorite in that Bachelor Stakes. You don't see that too often. Coburn was a 3-5 favorite in that race, and Wheeling Springs, he jumped up from an 83 buyer to a 95 buyer in that Bachelor Stakes. So he's on a 3-race win streak, going from a 69 buyer to an 83 buyer to a 95 buyer. Like, this horse has absolutely rocketed up the speed ratings in his last 3 races. Before that, he was running pretty decently. It looked like they kind of sprinted him and went long, then back to sprinting. I don't know. He's an Arkansas bred. I think maybe he just had the race of his life that day. So, if he had the race of his life, maybe Coburn isn't as good as we think. Therefore, I'm just going to single Old Homestead and hope we get home with the Florida bred runner out of Louisiana. Okay, so that brings us now. That's the first 2. So now it brings us to the third race of the Pick-6. This is the J.W. Murphy Stakes, 1 mile on the turf for 3-year-olds. So kind of, these 3-year-old turf races are kind of iffy because, horses haven't really had a chance to really develop and run, to the numbers that you see on the PPs. So that's why, 4-year-old stakes turf races are a little easier to handicap because you kind of know what the horse's running style is, kind of see when they're coming into form, and kind of what their maximum level is. These 3-year-olds, you don't really know. And a lot of times we saw it on the Churchill undercard. A horse named Stolen Base won the 3-year-old turf race that day, and he was like 6-7 to 1, and he won it pretty easily too. So these are great races to take a shot with some prices, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm actually going to play against the favorite again. I'm doing it again on the turf. The favorite in this one is going to be a horse, I believe it's Ready to Perform by another Brad Cox horse on the turf. This horse won its first 2 races, won a turf stakes at Laurel Park last October, then went to Del Mar on Breeders' Cup weekend. Got 7th that day, didn't do really great. And then we haven't seen him since. So he's been off since last November. I don't know. Long layoff. I'm not going to trust it. I'm just going to throw him out and fade him because this is a deep race. There is 11 horses in this field. So, I think it's best to take a shot with someone else. And with this being a 3-year-old stakes race in Maryland, there's a couple horses in here that I like based on their name, and I like, I can kind of see it on their form. So the first horse we have to talk about is shout out to my Uncle Joe. My Uncle Joe lived outside of Baltimore for over 20 years. He's been to Laurel Park a bunch of times, been to Pimlico. And so the horse that won the prep for the Preakness Stakes, he got an automatic entry. His name is Joe. It's just Joe. So Maryland bred. So this one's a shout out to my Uncle Joe. And I thought this horse was going to run in the Preakness, but he came back. He only got an 87 buyer out of that Federico Tessio, which is a dirt race. So I guess the trainer probably looked at that thinking, the buyer's kind of way down there. He doesn't have a realistic chance to win the Preakness. So here he goes. He enters him in the James McKnight Stakes on the turf. The funny thing about that, he's only raced on the turf 1 time in his life. Joe, he started his career with a turf sprint, and he got 5th place. That was last October. Since then, he ran on dirt, and since they switched him to dirt, he had 5 races on dirt, 4 wins in the 2nd place. So he's a pretty great local dirt horse. Remains to be seen what he's going to do really on the turf going a 2-turn 1 mile. I just think he's in really good form. He's coming off that big win at Laurel Park. He had a spot in the Preakness if he wanted it. He came back, fired a bullet workout out of that. I think the trainer, he did the right thing to give him a real shot at winning a race. I don't think he could have won the Preakness against like Epicenter. So Joe's in here, my Uncle Joe. It's a great, it looks like a solid horse, great name bet. We're going to roll with Joe on the ticket. And then, so that brings me to my next horse. a thing my Uncle Joe loved to do was do a little steam some crabs. I think that's what they do up there, right? They put some natty boh and some vinegar in the pot, boil it up, layer some blue crab on top, sprinkle Old Bay all over it. Well, there's a horse in here, a Maryland bred named Crabs and Beer. Probably one of my favorite named horses of all time. So we got Joe and we got Crabs and Beer. I think that's your exacta right there, personally. So the thing with Crabs and Beer now, he's another dirt runner. He's ran 8 times on the dirt, only 1 time on the turf. Well, kind of the opposite with Joe. Crabs and Beer started his career on the dirt, and then his last race they switched him to the turf in an optional claimer, a 5.5 furlong sprint. So he did a sprint, and guess what? First time out, he won on the turf. Crabs and Beer, you gotta love it. So I mean, why not? They're moving now. He's going to be second race on the turf. They're moving him up from a turf sprint to a 2-turn 1 mile race. Let's take a shot. Crabs and Beer and Joe. It's all good. The Maryland breds. And then while I do love those two, I got to go with one more. I think there's a logical horse based on the numbers in here. That'd be Riot House. He is the 7 horse. Crabs and Beer and Joe are the 9 and the 10 respectively. So the 7 horse is named Riot House. This is a horse coming out of Gulfstream Park down here in Florida. So they started him at Belmont last year on the turf. He did 2 turf sprints for Wesley Ward. He wasn't fast enough. He got 3rd and 4th place. So I guess the owner probably transferred him to a different barn, Danny Gargan, because it looks like he started him in Gulfstream Park in a 2-turn mile race on his maiden special weight, and he won it. This was back in March, so he won it. He won his first time going 2 turns on the turf. Comes back in an optional claimer at Gulfstream. He wins again. So he's had 2 wins in a row in 22. He's going for his 3rd straight start on the turf around 2 turns. He had a 77 buyer, which is better than Ready to Perform, who's the favorite in this race. So I think Riot House is another logical horse to go and get the job done. So we got 7, 9, and 10, Crabs and Beer and Joe, and Riot House. And let's get that done for the 3rd race. So now, let me take a sip of water. We're halfway through. All right, moving on to the 4th race. This is going to be the Sir Barton Stakes, another listed stakes, 1 mile and a 16th on the dirt. So the horse that actually ruined it for everyone, Ethereal Road. He is in this race. He was the number 20 horse in the Kentucky Derby, and then Dwayne Lucas pulled him out of the Derby, and that allowed Rich Strike to enter the Derby and crush all of our hopes and dreams in my Pick-4 tickets. And he finds himself here in this Sir Barton Stakes. So definitely a step down for he probably wasn't going to win that Kentucky Derby, but Rich Strike sure did. I'm not going to use him in here. He had a bunch of runs at Keeneland to try to get in the Derby, and then he was probably too tired to run in the Derby. So I just don't really know how he's going to be coming into this race. Luis Saez does jump on board. Luis Saez won the Kentucky Oaks with Secret Oath. So same trainer. I think he liked what he saw with Luis Saez, and he's going to ride Ethereal Road in this race. But there's 2 horses that I like, and one of them is a logical choice. I believe he's the 2nd choice, maybe the favorite. I think he actually is the favorite. It's going to be B-Doc. He is the 5 horse, and this is a horse Doug O'Neill trained. So he's been a West Coast horse for the first 4 starts of his career. Never won. They kind of moved him from turf to synthetic. They were trying, dirt twice. Like, it just never worked for him. And then, so what does Doug O'Neill do? He ships him out to Keeneland, and then he goes to Keeneland over 7 furlongs in a maiden special weight and wins by 11 lengths with a 92 buyer. He went from a 66 to a 92 buyer. Absolutely crazy jump by B-Doc. And I think what happened was, maybe there were some other fast horses in California he was running up against, or, maybe he just didn't like the dirt out in California and he liked the Keeneland dirt. But moving him to the east really worked for B-Doc. And he went just crazy with that 11th length win. So I'm getting a 10-minute warning here on my Zoom, so we will speed this up. So B-Doc with that 11 length win, 92 buyer. He is facing winners for the first time, so that's why I'm not going to single him. I'm going to use another horse, a horse, Mr. Jefferson. He's the 6th, another Maryland bred. He actually finished second by a head to Joe in that Federico Tessio. So he missed out on a spot in the Preakness by a head. Almost had it. It really, he moved from the Withers where he ran behind early voting. He didn't do well that day. He got 9th. He didn't like the muddy track. So they moved him back to Laurel Park, and he almost got a spot in the Preakness. So he ends up here in the Sir Barton. Mr. Jefferson is a logical horse to hopefully make another improvement. He ran an 87 buyer, so kind of a little bit behind B-Doc, but if he makes an improvement, I think he's right there. I think they really wanted to run this horse in the Preakness, and so he gets his shot here in the Sir Barton. So I'm going to use those two horses, and we're going to go to the 5th race now, which is just the turf sprint, the Jim McKay turf sprint, listed turf sprint. Now, these are the races that are absolute crapshoots on these big days where 5 furlongs on the turf, anything could happen. If a horse breaks slowly or comes out of the gate sideways or bumps another horse, like any kind of favorite or can just be knocked out of the race in a second, and any kind of long shot can get out on a lead and then find it. All of a sudden they turn for home and you have a long shot that everyone else has to go run down. And it's happened before, man. So the good thing about this ticket is I'm skinny enough in the other legs where there's 10 horses in this field, and I'm just going to throw out 3 of them, and I'm going to use 7 horses in this race to get us to the Preakness. And looked at the odds, and the longest horses on the board were, there was 2 30-1 horses and a 20-1. And I looked at them, and guess what? All 3 of them have never run on the turf ever. So to me, that was pretty simple. Like, just take the 3 horses that have never run on the turf, toss them out of there, and then we're just going to go on with the 7 that have. So the 3 horses that haven't run on the turf are going to be the 4, the 8, and the 10. Arthur's Hope, the Wolfman, and Concrete Glory. Throw the bombs out of there. We're just going to try to hit 1 out of the other 7. I didn't really find one horse that I could really put head and shoulders above the other. So I'm just going to put them all in a bag. Hopefully, if we're alive at this point, this pretty much guarantees we get to the Preakness with a live Pick-6 ticket. So 7 horses. I'm going to go with the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 9. Again, anything other than the longest bombs, we're going to put them in and get it to the Preakness. So now we've arrived at the big one. It's behind me on the dirt track, Preakness Stakes at Pimlico. We talked about it in our other podcast. Horse Guy Mike and I both love Epicenter. He's our top choice. I thought about singling him in this spot, but I singled Old Forester back in the Chick Lane Sprint. I'm going to use the other horse that I really like too. I'm going to use Simplification in there as well. So I'm going to go 2 deep, Epicenter, and Simplification. I think if Epicenter is tired, he had that really tough race chasing the fastest early pace in Kentucky Derby history. He almost finished it off. I think he'll be fine, but just in case he's not okay and he's kind of a little bit leg weary as they run down the home stretch, I really like how Simplification finished up. He saved a lot more ground. He didn't use himself that early in the Derby. He also didn't finish as well as Rich Strike did, but I think Simplification riding the rail, I think he could get kind of a perfect rail trip in here. And if Epicenter is a little bit leg weary, maybe Simplification can run down early voting if early voting is the one on the lead. So I want 2 options. Like I said, I'm going to make my stand earlier in the card. So I'm going to use my top 2 choices. And so that's it. That's my $50 ticket. I'm going to go over it for you one more time before I close out this recording. So with that being said, the first race 8, we're going to go with the 1, the 4, and the 6 playing against the favorite. The second race 9, we're going to hammer the favorite. We're going to play the 5, Old Forester, on the single. I hope he's just the speed of the speed, rockets out there, puts away Coburn, and never looks back. The next race is race 10. It's the Jim McKay or the James Murphy turf for 3-year-olds. This is the Uncle Joe Crabs and Beer Riot House race. Let's beat the favorite in that one. We're moving on to race 11. This is the Sir Barton Stakes. We're going to go with the favorite D-Doc, and then the other local horse. I forgot his name. Bring up the sheets. The 5 and the 6. It's B-Doc and what's his name? Mr. Jefferson. That's it. B-Doc and Mr. Jefferson. Mr. Jefferson tried to get in the Preakness, couldn't quite do it. So he's here in the Sir Barton on the undercard. Hopefully he gets the win that he thought he was going to get in the Preakness. So with that, then we move on to race 12. This is that turf sprint where I'm going 7 deep. We're going 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9. Throw out the 30-1 shots, the 20-1 shots. We don't want them. They've never raced on turf. They're not going to win. And then finally, we're finishing it off with the Preakness. We're going with Epicenter on top, but I'm also throwing in simplification, maybe to get us a price at the end of the day and get all of our money back that we lost on Rich Strike. Wouldn't that be something? Well, this has been fun. Horse Guy Mike, we'll see how this $50 Pick-6 ticket plays out. I might have taken your job. So anyway, with that being said, everyone have fun on Saturday, and may the Black-Eyed Susans be with you.